I hope you all are well and safe and healthy, and I hope you're still creating at home. We're so glad to have this technology so that we can continue to connect with you and continue to engage with you creatively. In light of our current exhibition, our student member faculty show, I wanted to give a little online tutorial about how to present your work for exhibition. Most of our students and members do a great job of bringing things ready for installation to us. But this might be a refresher for most, but for those of you who have questions, this would be a nice course for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on two-dimensional artwork. If you have especially heavy or three-dimensional or very non-traditional kind of work that you have questions about installation, please feel free to email me at nathan@dfac.org. That's Nathan, Nathan, @dfac.org. So there's a lot of different hardware out there to put on the back of your piece. The most traditional, of course, is wire. I've seen a lot of really interesting hardware setups, and I've seen a lot of really not very good setups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on a sort of museum quality hardware installation on the back of your piece. My favorite, and also the museum's favorite kind of hardware are these things. These are called D-rings because they're shaped like a D. They come in different sizes. They come in this kind of smaller size. They come in this kind of medium size. Sometimes they have 2 holes. Sometimes they have 3 holes, depending on the weight of your piece. There's another type that is extremely huge. And those are for the really, really big pieces that you might see in a museum from the Renaissance with huge gilded frames or something like that. My general rule of thumb is for any piece larger or equal to 24 inches by 36 inches, you should really start thinking about using these middle size D-rings. Sometimes a smaller piece will have an especially large frame, so use your discretion, always keeping in mind the safety of your piece, the safety of the viewer in the exhibition space, and especially the safety of the buyer who will be living with that piece for the rest of their life. For example, one odd installation that I had was to hang a fish fossil, weighed a couple hundred pounds, so we obviously did not use D-rings. Before we get into how to put them on the piece, let's talk about where do I buy these. I buy mine, these kind of simple pieces, at my local Home Depot. Any hardware store carries these. They'll be in the hardware aisle in a picture hanging section. They come in packs of 14, and they're about $8 each. Right now, you'll have to get them online, of course. You can also try a company called Ook. That's OOK.com. They have everything you need there too. So what we like to do when we put hardware on is put a nice clean surface between our work table and the actual work itself. You can use mat board, foam core, cardboard, a nice soft blanket. As a kind of added bonus to today's presentation, I brought in a bunch of pictures from my family's own art collection, so we can talk about those pieces as well. A big part of this push to engage with our members and students and everyone out there in the internet is to really make what we're presenting to be human and to connect with each other as humans through this technology. So I thought by bringing in some of my family's pieces, we could get to know each other a little bit better. This first painting that we're doing is 30 by 40. It's on canvas. This is a piece from my Pond's Edge series. I've painted this piece alongside my students in the Wetland to Studio class that I teach here at Dunedin Fine Arts Center on Saturdays. I like to paint alongside the students. It's just fun to do and to demonstrate different techniques, splattering and pouring and things like that. We work a lot on the floor, actually, before we get on the easel, so it's pretty fun. So what you're going to do, this is an acrylic painting, so I feel okay about putting it face down, because acrylic is basically plastic. I would never do this with an oil painting. An oil painting you'll always want to keep upright, and you'll need to kind of, it's a bit difficult to do, but you'll have to kind of stabilize it and work from the back here with it standing up. The reason being that oil paint takes a really long time to dry, even though it's touch dry. So put the piece down on the table here. Got a measuring tape. The important thing to do is to think ahead. When somebody buys your piece, they may want to remove the wire and just hang it strictly from the D-ring so that they never ever have to fix it again and it stays stable. It's a little bit harder to install because you need a level and all of that, but it really is much more stable. It's also better for the framework of the piece. And I'll show you that in a little bit. I'm going to come back to that after I put the wire on. So in thinking ahead about maybe hanging it from the D-rings, you want to make sure that the D-rings are at the same measurement from the top, left and right. And so what I usually do is I choose a kind of even number so that when I'm doing the installation math later on down the road, I'm not having to subtract 1/8 and 32nds. So on a piece like this, I think 6 inches is probably good. And that's the top of my D-ring. But what I really want to measure is the distance from the top of my D-ring to the hole. And these large D-rings are usually about 1 inch, sometimes 1.25 inches. So this one's 1 inch, so I want the top to be at 6, but I want my hole to be at 7. So I'll do that on this side too. So they're both the same. These kind of pre-stretched canvases have really soft wood. So you probably don't have to pre-drill anything, but sometimes it helps to take a little nail or kind of a punch and just make a little hole like that so that your screw doesn't spin around on the wood. Now all of these come with screws. The smaller D-rings have small screws, obviously. The big D-rings have large screws. Be cognizant of how thick your frame or your framework is so that your screw doesn't puncture the front of your piece. So we'll just drill this in, pretty easy. What you can do is you can keep them a little loose too, so that you can spin them. Not like that, like that. So if you take the wire off, you just have to put them up like that, and you can hang straight from the D-rings. But we're going to put wire on, so we want to point them towards the middle, because if we don't, I have a piece here to show you. This is a portrait from a series I did in 2007 when we lived in Denver. This is my wife's brother, Bill. He works for the city of Lakewood, Colorado. At the time, he was an arborist, and now he's up in the management positions, but he likes to grow his own trees. And the series was really thinking about how we brand ourselves as individuals, or how we've been asked to brand ourselves as individuals, actually, and the difference between branding and identity, personal identity. So anyway, He's painted green because of the leaves, and I really like doing this series. It was intended for me to get to know my family better too, just by talking to them. So this piece is framed. It's got some D-rings on the back. It's also got some wire, because I was asked to put wire on it for an exhibition. What I just want to show you is when there is stress on the wire, it pulls the D-ring in, and that's not really what they're intended to do. And so over time, some of these D-rings will kind of start pulling out. So that's why we want to face them towards the middle. This one is not faced towards the middle because I did not frame this. And I've never fixed it, so there's something not to do. So there's a lot of different kinds of wire, and I think you've probably seen them before. This is really nice plastic coated picture wire. It's malleable. The plastic coating protects the metal over time from the elements and corrosion and whatnot. This wire works too. This is just braided wire. You can find it anywhere. Again, it's malleable. The only thing is that it's not coated with plastic, so over time it gets brittle. So a lot of times, I've had this happen a couple of times in different institutions where the wire was not securely attached to the D-rings, and when I hung the piece on the wall, it literally fell back into my hands. So I'm going to show you the best way to wrap the wire on the D-rings so that you won't have any slippage. So you pass it through the hook or the D-ring and fold it over on itself. And you want to give yourself, not too much, but plenty to work with. You pass it under. I'm going to put this in the middle of the table here. Pass it under to make a kind of a U or a horseshoe. Pass it back through the ring. And you see now how it's holding on to itself. And now you do that traditional kind of twist around the wire. You want to keep this part as tight as possible. Real snuggy. And then if you want, kind of pull down on it like that. Now you'll come over here, pass it through again, but don't do the whole thing yet, because first we want to think about where this is going to be. I'm going to go off camera for a second here. So there's no real rule of thumb here. When we're installing artworks, we're used to making all kinds of measurements. But what you do want to make sure is that your wire isn't so high that the hardware sticks up over the piece. So something like that is usually good down here. Kind of general rule of thumb is that you can lift this D-ring. Lift that up, start folding it over, and by the time you push it down, there'll be enough slack in there to clear the framework. So again, under, make your horseshoe, pass it back through. And at this point, you can kind of cut your wire because you know you got plenty. And wrap that around. So this is the preferred kind of method. This is going to keep everything safe and secure. And it's ready to hang. So now we're going to run through a couple of other different hanging options. And I just wanted to show you one thing before I do that. This is a painting my wife did when we first met. We used to live in the basement of a gallery with 10 other artists. We each had our own studios. And Kate and I were packed into a 450-foot square foot little studio in the basement. But she painted this picture from, this was a flyover of Mars. And I was really proud of her, of all the color she put into it, because it was a great picture. So yeah, she did a really fabulous job. We got it framed and everything. This one just has D-rings. This is how I like to hang most of the pictures at home, so I never have to fix them when they get crooked. What's really nice about having D-rings going straight up is that it works with gravity and not against gravity. This keeps it really strong. The next kind of hardware that we see a lot of are the eye hooks. And they look like this. And these are especially handy when you have a really thin frame, like this one. This is a picture I got at Trashy Treasures. Trashy Treasures are one of our most popular events here at the Art Center, I think probably in Tampa Bay. This picture reminded me so much of my deceased maternal grandmother that I just had to have it. So I love hanging this piece. If you can see, the edge of this piece in the back is really, really thin. So it's going to be really difficult to get a D-ring on there without it hanging over the edge. You could do it like this, which is probably what I would have done on this piece, because I think that these are more secure. But this person used very, very small eye hooks, if you can see them. The problem with eye hooks sometimes is that people are not able to, or they just don't drive them in far enough, and the shafts start to bend and pull out or split the wood. So this is one of the reasons I really not a huge fan of eye hooks. But if you have to use them, again, you can make your measurements, make your little hole, and then you start, sorry, do that over here. Start spinning it in. So I have pretty strong hands, so this is not a big deal for me. But you really got to get that all the way down to where the circle touches the wood. Again, being cognizant of how thick your frame is. If it's too hard for you to turn, you can stick a nail in there or a toothpick or something. It gives you an extra leverage. If you can you see that? And you just use it like a crank like that. And you can really drive it in there. Okay. An alternative to eye hooks are these really nice pieces of hardware. These would fit on the edge like that. And you can put the wire in this little loop. These are much stronger. There's 2 screws instead of 1, and they're really beefy. So if you can get your hands on these are really nice too. What's nice about these is they kind of keep the work flatter to the wall, because sometimes those eye hooks are really big and your piece kind of bumps out. Okay. So if you have something that's really, really heavy, another really cool piece of hardware is called a cleat. You can make your own by, if you have the tools to cut any piece of wood, say a 1x2 or a 2x4, in a 45-degree angle right down the middle. You can make your own, but you can also buy them at Home Depot or any hardware store. They look like this. Again, this is from ook.com, so you can buy them there too. This little tiny cleat holds 60 pounds. Of course, you have to put drywall anchors into the wall and everything, or put it into studs, but these are really, really sturdy. And here's how they work. If my hand is the wall, you have to put one on the wall. You have to put the other half on the piece. And when you hang the work up, it slides right down like that. They're really beefy and they're really strong. We always try to use these on really big mirrors, especially. The other really nice thing about cleats is that although you should always try to aim, for the middle, if you don't, you can kind of slide it a little bit to get where you need to go. So in a big piece, they have cleats that are this long, or you could put 2 of these on either side. So the last thing I've seen, and I'm not a huge fan of, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but what I have seen is pieces like this, unframed canvases will not have any hanging hardware on them at all, and we will have to hang them directly from the stretcher bars. I'm not a huge fan of this because I don't think it's very safe. I think, with the right kind of bump, something could bump this right off the wall. So I think, especially if somebody's going to be buying your pieces, that they should be ready to hang for them as a matter of safety and courtesy. So now that the work is ready for exhibition, you're ready to take it down to the Dunedin Fine Arts Center for the big show. What we want to do is make sure it's clean before it gets there. So this piece that I showed you before is pretty dirty. I didn't realize how dirty our pieces were, so it's nice to clean them. This has glass on it. So you just use glass cleaner and a nice soft rag. Don't spray the piece. Some of these droplets might get under the framework and ruin the mats or even your artwork. You want to spray the cloth and then clean it. So there's going to be a lot of fingerprints on here and smooches and whatnot. You want to get all of those off. Since I'm cleaning stuff, I'd like to clean this really great picture of my wife's grandmother. Her name was Vera, middle name Isabella, and that is who our daughter is named after. So this is a very special picture for our family. What I liked about this picture, this has wire. The thing about wire pictures is, this, sometimes they get crooked and you have to adjust them. You can put these little footsies on, these little rubber footsies, and those will kind of grip the wall. Another thing that we see a lot of are metal frames. Metal frames are a really nice option. Sometimes they look really, really good. I've found that they're not always as strong as the wood frames. They tend to bend. And this is a piece by one of my favorite artists, Javier Dones. He's an artist in St. Petersburg. He uses kind of like chemicals and enamel on copper. It's pretty cool stuff. So the thing with metal frames is, especially on large pieces with glass, they tend to bend in. And it might be hard to see here, but the corners start to split. So while exhibiting them with wire, I would hang 2 hooks to distribute the weight. And when it comes time to for its permanent home, I might even take the wire off and hang them straight from these little pieces that are locked into the frame itself. That takes pretty exact measurement, but you can do it. If you're not going to frame your piece or have it framed, you'll consider finishing the edges of your canvas. And your instructors should be teaching you this, but this is a piece by one of our most popular instructors, Lorraine Pataki. And you can see that she's done a really nice job of finishing the edge of her work here. She's done a really great job of preparing her work. on the back side with good hardware and nice wire wrapping. She's decided to pick up on some of the color in the piece to paint the edge, so it looks really nice and sharp and finished. That's ready to hang, that's ready to buy. Another way you can do it is to wrap the image around the piece. This is by one of our members, Bonnie Abbott. She's a member of the Studio 1212 Gallery in Clearwater. And what she's done is she's wrapped the image around the piece. So that takes a little bit more conscientious work, but she's done a great job there. And then again, putting some nice hardware and wire on the back for us really helps this stay secure on the wall. So the last thing I want to talk about is how to store things and how to carry things. So these canvases are pretty sturdy. I feel pretty good about carrying them like this. But larger pieces that are framed especially, I see this a lot. And I'm going to do this to my own piece even though I don't want to. I see people carrying their framed pieces like that a lot. Now on a really small piece like this, that's a sturdy frame. That's not going to go anywhere if I do that. I might get some fingerprints on the glass if I do that. But on a piece like this that's big, it's a little bit heavy because of the frame. What's happening here is I'm lifting the middle, and it's actually over time going to start bowing, and it might even split the corners. So what I would suggest is carrying them by the sides like this. This is the best way to carry large artworks. If you need an extra hand to carry your artwork, don't be afraid to ask someone to help you too. We do that all the time in museums and at the art center. We try to help each other carry the pieces. We don't want to take the risk of anybody dropping something. All right, well that's about it for today. If you have any questions, please do feel free to email me at nathan@dfac.org. I hope you will all stay healthy, well, and creative.